Pawn shop owners. What was the most illegal thing a customer had brought to your shop? Worked at a gun shop and a shady-looking guy brought in a few pairs of night vision goggles. Like high-end military-grade PVS-14 night vision goggles. Ask him why he was selling them. Oh, I just don't need them anymore. Cool man. Do you mind if I call the company real quick and run the numbers? Sometimes this stuff is stolen property. And as soon as I said that, he jumped across the counter, grabbed the goggles and bolted for the door. Employee not owner. A guy brought in a stack of like 15 laptops that all said property of City Public School right on the top of each one. He then threatened to shoot me when I told him to get out. Edit, because it's been brought up multiple times. Yes, I am aware that schools, businesses, etc. sometimes sell off old laptops. Which is why I don't flat out call the cops whenever somebody brings in a suspected stolen item. There's always the chance that no matter how obviously stolen it is, the person owns it legit. However, I'm not going to risk my job or my conscience by taking in an item if it has a label on it claiming it's somebody else's property. Also, how am I supposed to sell a laptop that says property of City Public Schools on it? Pawn shops have a bad enough rap as it is. Buddy of mine worked at a pawn shop for a few years. They had a guy try to sell them a police walkie-talkie. Like straight stolen from a car but with the battery taken out. They told him to get fucked and called the cops. I believe they picked the guy up a few hours later. This just reminded me of my friend, who pawned the DSLR camera I let him borrow for a school project. I asked for it back a good amount of times and not once did he tell me what he did. I had to hear it from someone else and then he claimed that I gave it to him. Not an owner but an employee. A man brought in a bag of cocaine and said if I would buy it then resell it back to him in a couple of days. Okay, I'm not a pawn shop owner but I know a few. One thing I've seen was a guy who brought in smoke grenades and M249 saw belts that he had stolen from our local military drill center. Another was a guy at a local gun store who brought in a pistol that had an illegal oil filter suppressor on it. They told the guy, "Get the fuck out and go destroy that thing." Not an owner, but I got a call from a pawn shop saying that one of my at-home employees tried to sell her work computer. It has my company's logo and contact info right on it, plain as day. How stupid can some people be? A guy literally brought in an RPG. He was doing yard work for this old lady whose husband had passed. She gave it to him for doing some yard work, not realizing it was live and active. The guy was career military and after the bomb squad came and disabled it, they went to her house and found a trove of similarly very illegal military-grade weapons. Just a worker here, but we had a couple come in to pawn their backhoe over the weekend, happens a lot, and brought their bill of sale. They wanted a simple $1,000 loan, which wasn't bad considering how much it was worth. No more than 30 minutes later cops are there with the owner. Apparently they worked for him and went and pawned all of his industrial equipment. In a similar vein, my friend found some weed in the oven he bought from a used appliance store. The shop called him to ask about the oven. Luckily, he didn't give out his address. Literally had a customer come in and say, "Hi, I've just stolen this phone off my sister. How much will you give me for it?" Also had a customer bring in 5 MacBooks at the same time, with a certain logo on it which gave me the impression they were stolen. Told him to leave them with me for testing and called the police. Had another customer bring in a gun and a crossbow. That was weird. I'm in the UK. This is not a normal thing. I had this guitar that had a lil sliding door on the side. Meant to hold picks. I put weed in there as a joke. Completely forgot about it as I was selling it. They were chill. I didn't work there but was there at the time. A guy brings in a dead duck. Witch hunting is illegal in my area and also why. You always gotta look out for the people bringing in a shit ton of brand spanking new tools or electronics. Over time you learn to read people based on their appearance. behavior, and personal information. An experienced pawnbroker can almost always immediately sleuth out whether they're stolen or not in these cases. They usually are. I've never had someone intentionally bring in illicit items. But it's important to check pockets and compartments on cases and similar things. It's not unheard of for some eclectic customer to forget about a lil baggie of weed they'd stashed. One guy paid off his loan with cash. And there was a thin layer of white residue coating it. First time I'd seen that one, not illegal. But toward the beginning of the coronavirus outbreak, some wisecrack nutcase did try to sell us disinfectant. Funny but also annoying. So I'm not an owner and I wouldn't call this illegal per se. But I feel like I have to share this. A friend of mine owns a pawn shop. And one day a dude walks in with a cardboard box filled to the top with his own shit. He claims that it's magic and my friend cuts him off right there and kicks him out. As he is walking out he drops the box on accident. Gets all of his shit on the floor. Sees the mess he's made. Stares at the horrid pile of shit for a couple of seconds. And runs out of the shop. My friend never got his name. And never saw him again. The smell would proceed to linger in the shop for a good month after it was cleaned up. Edit. Typo. Not a pawn shop owner but was in the pawn shop when this happened. Someone brought in a wheelchair with the tag for the local hospital on the back. Example. Property of somewhere hospital. The pawn shop owner told them to leave it and get out. They did and he called the non-emergency line. The police came and picked it up and took it back to the hospital, or that's what they said they were doing. Friend of mine owns a shop. One day a woman walks in and asks if there was a female employee she could talk to. No problem, it's a family shop and his 18-year-old daughter comes out to help her. She asks to go out to her car where she opens the trunk. Whole thing is packed with sex toys. Bondage shit. Outfits and a big box of dildos. Woman says her sister who recently passed away sold this stuff at parties and she had no idea what to do with it. A friend of mine owns a rather unique store. Not a pawn shop. But he sells a lot of authentic medieval weaponry, armor, clothing and similar. While I was there, a young couple decided his shop was the place to sell a few old SS daggers, belts, flags and other Nazi memorabilia. Solid logic. Except for one thing. We are in Germany. Here the state kind of frowns upon owning or selling this kind of stuff. They could have donated it to any museum and would have had no issue with the law whatsoever. I mean, it was not their fault they found it, right? But they figured that if Grandpa was a Nazi, he could at least help with the funds for the renovations and decided cash was better than being named in a museum leaflet. My friend was mostly insulted by the idea that just because he owns a medieval store and sells historic weapons, he must know a Nazi collector that would pay cash. But that was the end of it. He told them to get out and donate it, or if they insist on selling it, to ship it to the US. More money from history buffs, or at least not one happy little German Nazi with a new happy stabby toy. Not a pawn shop owner. But I was on the receiving end of someone selling my stolen stuff at one. We had our house burgled in UK. Me and my dad went to some pawn shops to give them a list of everything taken. Whilst we were in there, someone comes up to counter and starts unloading a bunch of stuff they want to pawn. It was our stuff. We got in a major incident inside the shop. The asshole manager of cash converters was saying it's nothing to do with me. Take it all outside the shop. Sorry buddy, but when you're happy to buy a camera full of someone else's family photos, a laptop, and a bunch of other electronics from two junkies who look like they're homeless, no teeth, obvious signs of drug abuse etc., then it's absolutely 100% your problem to deal with. Police called. Junkies charged with handling stolen goods. I got charged with assault. That was later dropped. Nobody charged with the actual burglary. So no real punishments for anyone involved. I used to work at a paw store. A shady guy brought in a tiger skull. I don't remember if it was illegal or not. But the owner was yelling at him. He kept coming back brining animal skin and skulls. I think the police drug busted his house. From what the owner told me. A TV was stolen from my dad's office and sold to a pawn shop, Pawn America. La Crosse. Why? This had been happening with yard decorations and our neighbors told us what pawn shop to look at. Sure enough, it showed up, and at first the manager would not provide any info or even cared that we thought it was stolen. My dad then offered to buy it and requested that the TV be plugged in to check for defects. It worked just fine and my dad said he will take it. But then pulled the remote out his pocket that the thief didn't take and turned the TV off, proving it was his. The manager then had to call and report this. Turns out accepting a TV without a remote is a red flag that he missed in this case. The manager quit, but the general belief was he knew most of the stuff he was selling was stolen, but he fudged paperwork to keep the thief's identity a secret. My dad put him in his place and humiliated him in the most simple way for being a lying fuck. Employee here, not an owner, but I don't know if it's necessarily illegal, but one time a guy brought me a handful of human teeth with bloody roots and gold filings. He wanted me to extract the gold. I said no thanks, bro. I don't like pawn shops. My buddy had his surfboard stolen. A few weeks later he found his board in a pawn shop. My buddy approached the staff and said it was his and it had been stolen. The staff then told him he had to buy the board if he wanted it back. The police were called because the board was reported stolen. Upon the arrival of the police, my buddy learned that he still had to buy the board if he wanted it back and then file a claim with the state to get his money back. Why does the state cover pawn shops selling stolen goods? Not a pawn shop owner or employee, but a block away from my high school was a pawn shop. It was announced that everyone in the entire school was going to get a Chromebook to do schoolwork. On the first day that we got the Chromebooks, it was rumored that multiple people had brought them to the pawn shop to make a quick buck. I asked one of my teachers who was in charge of all the Chromebook repairs about this later, and he said that only one student had actually done it that he knew of. And he had used the money to buy weed. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, and hit the notification button. See you next time.